Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the community of independent thinkers who refuse to be manipulated by the mainstream media. The elites in Washington and the mainstream newsrooms are buzzing right now about diplomatic rifts, rising oil prices, and what they call unintentional tragedies on the front pages. They serve you a banquet of lies wrapped in academic, moralistic language. They call what is unfolding in the Middle East an unfortunate escalation. They call the deaths on the streets tactical mistakes. But let me be straight with you. Let us strip away all that fog of delusion. What we are truly witnessing are not isolated accidents. What we are witnessing is the bloody collapse of an order built on supreme hubris, the shattering of a system where the weak are crushed and the self-proclaimed hegemons are thrashing around in a trap of their own making. Let us start by looking at the surface of this ruthless reality where naivete is paid for with blood. You might have read the report about a Palestinian family of 6 who went out for a ride in their car. They had just broken their fast. They were going out to buy new clothes for the upcoming holiday, and they had bought sweet donut holes. It was a portrait of absolute normalcy. The father, a man working in the construction sector in Israel, firmly believed he was safe. He believed that because he posed no threat, and because he could speak fluent Hebrew to talk his way out of any trouble, his family would be perfectly fine. That is a heartbreakingly naive belief. He believed in the existence of some rules-based system that would protect him from the blunt instrument of state power. But reality answered him with laser pointers shining from every direction and a deafening fusillade of gunfire. A family trip for 6, but only 2 young boys made it back alive. The father, the mother, and 2 children, including a blind 6-year-old boy, were ruthlessly gunned down in their own car. The Israeli-occupied West Bank is currently under a suffocating siege, the likes of which we have not seen in years, with a body count that is rapidly piling up. The story of this family is not merely a sad news bulletin. It is the most glaring lesson about the anarchic nature of our world. In an anarchic system, there is no supreme authority, no global 911 to call when your life is threatened by a military force. Kindness, innocence, or the ability to speak the hegemon's language do not constitute armor. The naked truth is that power dictates everything. The current security architecture places civilians directly into the meat grinder of great power politics and regional security dilemmas, where military forces operate entirely based on fear and their own ruthless survival calculus. The men with guns on the ground do not care about morality. They respond to perceived risks with maximum lethal force. Israeli police and military claimed they sensed danger and responded by shooting, a justification that perfectly encapsulates the security dilemma in real time. The liberal delusion of the West, the belief that you can draw humanitarian red lines in an existential conflict, is exactly what has led so many down the primrose path to absolute destruction. And this disastrous naivete is not confined to the dusty streets of the West Bank. Elevate your perspective to the macro level, and you will see the exact same hubris tearing the global economy apart. Look at the Strait of Hormuz. This is not some random puddle on a map. Roughly a fifth of the world's oil is forced to flow through this narrow, vital choke point. And right now, Iran has established a de facto blockade, strangling that critical artery for America and its allies. The material consequences are immediate and impossible to hide. International oil prices have pushed past $106 a barrel. We are not talking about abstract concepts. We are talking about the lifeblood of industrial economies bleeding out. The U.S. Energy Secretary himself had to go on television and admit that there are no guarantees prices will fall and that energy prices could remain high. What is President Trump doing to manage this structural crisis? He is barking out demands, pressuring NATO allies to send warships to end the blockade. He is threatening that if there is no response or a negative response, it will be very bad for the future of NATO. Even more laughably, He is demanding that China, the only true peer competitor to the United States, deploy its navy to protect American interests in the Gulf, threatening to postpone an early April summit in Beijing with Xi Jinping if they do not comply. This is a public display of geopolitical suicide. Let me dissect this delusion for you. Why on earth would China send its warships to clean up a mess created by Washington? The elite circles in Washington believe they can dictate terms to the globe. But Beijing sees that it does not have to lift a single finger. Iranian forces are explicitly allowing ships carrying oil to China to cross the strait, while attacking other oil tankers and setting them on fire with projectiles. Therefore, leaders in Beijing have absolutely no incentive to send in their naval power. China is enjoying a massive strategic free ride. They are siphoning up invaluable energy resources while standing back and watching the reigning hegemon, the United States, erode its own power, deplete its military assets, and shatter its diplomatic credibility in non-core conflicts in the Middle East. By anchoring ourselves in the Gulf and exposing our naval platforms to uncontrollable escalation risks, the United States is repeating the fatal errors of past empires. It is the classic mechanism of imperial overstretch. This is a lesson we should have memorized from the Second World War, where expanding beyond core defensive perimeters inevitably collapses giant military machines. The internal political dynamics in Washington have tied the hands of its leaders. Instead of pivoting every ounce of national power to contain Beijing in East Asia, the foreign policy blob is obsessed with maintaining the illusion of unipolarity. The U.S. Energy Secretary goes on national television and declares that the United States needs to destroy Iran's military capabilities, including the weapons threatening the Strait. Think about that. Destroying the military of a nation capable of locking down the world's most critical maritime choke point. And we think Iran is just going to sit quietly and wait for the executioner? Naive. Utterly naive. Iran's foreign minister has stated clearly that they never asked for a ceasefire, never even asked for negotiation, and are ready to defend themselves for as long as it takes. They act not out of madness, but out of existential fear. When a state feels its regime survival and its very existence are threatened by overwhelming external firepower, it will react with every asymmetric weapon in its arsenal. The result of this escalation is an uncontrollable spiral of violence bleeding across the entire region. As the war enters its third week, there is no end in sight. The night sky is lit up by explosions. Airstrikes have hit the Iranian capital, Tehran, including its airport. In Lebanon, the sound of airstrikes and thunder mingle indistinguishably in the early morning hours. Iranian-backed Iraqi militias are firing missiles at Baghdad International Airport, injuring people and pushing Iraq into the crossfire. Drones have damaged a fuel tank and caused a fire at the international airport in Dubai, shattering the illusion of safety in one of the world's busiest economic hubs. And Saudi Arabia, an American ally, is scrambling to intercept drones near its capital and eastern province. The Israeli military is detecting Iranian missile launches and sounding sirens, forcing people into shelters. This is not a random collection of isolated incidents. This is the bloody domino effect of a failed hegemonic strategy. We have lied to ourselves for far too long. Every time we believed that firepower could impose democratic values, every time we believed that economic sanctions would bring a state fighting for its survival to its knees, every time we intervened and toppled regimes only to leave behind a scorched earth of anarchy. Look back at the history of the last 30 years, from the expansion of NATO eastward, backing a nuclear superpower into a corner at the 2008 Bucharest summit, to the ignition of proxy wars in non-core regions. We promise protection, but we are actually inciting national suicide. We fight to keep global sea lanes open, but the price in blood and treasure is paid by our own working class and our domestic economy, while our peer competitor in Asia smiles and reaps the benefits. The mechanism of attrition warfare is unforgiving. Artillery and industrial output dictate the victor, and right now the West is emptying its arsenals while the economic blowback hollows out its industrial base. The future is remarkably bleak. What is happening in the Middle East right now is not merely an energy crisis or a localized firefight. It is a death warrant for a grand strategy that has rotted from the inside out. The United States and the West are locked into a ruthless war of attrition, where their financial and military supremacy is evaporating drop by drop. As long as the leadership refuses to discard their moral delusions and their fantasy of a rules-based global order that they alone dictate, as long as they refuse to acknowledge the physical limitations of power, this meat grinder will continue to turn. The structural forces are set. The gears are grinding. The tragedy is locked in. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and never stop questioning the sugar-coated lies they feed you. The naked, ruthless truth is always out there, and it waits for no one. I will see you next time.